The time is 7:08 p.m. and this January 16th, 2025 Comprehensive Planning and Development Committee meeting of the Fairfax County School Board will now come to order. Mr. McDaniel has submitted a written request to participate in the meeting. Well, first of all, do we have Cal McDaniel on? He's on. Mr. McDaniel has submitted a written request to participate in the meeting virtually due to a personal conflict and is attending from his residence in the Hunter Mill District. All those in favor of approving Mr. McDaniel's request? Unanimous? So it is approved. All right, yeah, can you test your mic, Mr. McDaniel? You unmute yourself, just say hello. Can you hear us, Kyle? No. Okay, great. The minutes of the October 17th, 2024 CPDC meeting are before the committee for approval. Has everyone had a chance to review, or do you need a minute? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the minutes? Can you say, I move to approve the minutes?
I approve to approve the minutes.
Second? I have a second. All those in favor? All right, that's unanimous, all four in attendance. Okay, agenda item 1.03, updates from the chair. I think we have all been in attendance except for Ms. Herman at the recent work session where we received productive updates from Ms. Szymanski. And we also have all received and reflect on board docs are the follow-on motion reports. There are certain parts of the follow-on motions report that were redacted, specifically the part relating to potential reductions in leasing expenses, but the public-private partnerships report, which includes the proposed guidelines developed by facilities in combination with Office of Division Counsel, were posted to board docs for everyone to review. So with that, I'd like to turn to agenda item 1.04, updates from the Facilities Planning Advisory Council. Ms. Herman?
So the main update I was supposed to
Did you put in your mic?
Hi, everyone. Thank you again. Katie Herman, Chair of FPAC. Just general updates. Obviously, I look forward to the next agenda item to discuss, or an agenda item tonight to discuss the FPAC charter. But in addition to that, in December, we encouraged FPAC members to attend some community engagement meetings regarding school boundaries. So that was a successful endeavor for most of our members. And we just held our January meeting on Tuesday evening, where we received an update and briefing from FCPS staff on some of the organization and mission that they have, as well as a discussion on some CIP items. So we appreciated staff's time and efforts and updates, and that is my brief update.
Great, so thank you for that. With that, let me turn to agenda item 1.06, the revisions to the Facilities Planning Advisory Council Charter. I believe this is the first revision to the charter since FPAC was established. Is that correct?
I think there was an update in 2015, but I was not a part of FPAC at the time, but I believe that's the date of our current version of our charter. So it has been since 2015 in which there has been any revisions to my knowledge.
And I'll provide brief comments on kind of what I see is the major thrust of these revisions, but then I'd like to come back to you, Ms. Herman, to kind of provide larger context. I think in looking at the charter, at a time when we are undertaking a comprehensive school boundary review, there was identified the necessity to update the charter because the charter in its current form refers to FPAC convening community meetings. And in its current form, FPAC does not play any role in convening community meetings. That is instead a role undertaken by other parts of FCPS. But FPAC, in its current incarnation, and I think as we desire it to continue to be, provides a critical link between the community, industry, and FCPS, and providing critical independent expert input to the school board. And so we wanted to revise, or FPAC wanted to revise this charter to emphasize the fact that FPAC, and this is emphasized in the criteria for appointment to FPAC, that they have special, backgrounds, credentials that are sought after in order to be appointed, which distinguishes it from other advisory committees to the board, is really a set of industry experts, and not limited to the construction industry, but also energy management or architects or lawyers involved in real estate. Speaking from a very broad brush, people involved in construction and renovation, maintenance, infrastructure, from a variety of perspectives, because it's a very multifaceted field of experts that we have on FPAC and we benefit from. But it's not intended to be a convening organization bringing together the public with FCPS, because again, whatever the original intent of FPAC at its outset, that's not functions that it performs today. And then we also wanted to update the charter because there were extensive references to FPAC essentially being primarily responsible for revising school boundaries, and while it certainly has some role to play or input to be provided, that's not its primary function. And as we saw in the work session on Tuesday, there's a raft of challenges that we face as a school system where our needs vastly exceed our resources. And so providing greater specificity on areas that FCPS and FPAC will be working on in the next few years was viewed as desirable. So those are, from a very high level, kind of the general objectives of trying to revise this charter. And Ms. Herman, if I can turn over to you to provide more specific comments.
I actually think your summary was very well put and included all the main aspects that FPAC members considered when we had our conversations. Again, just to mention, we did try to condense some of the background information, which can be found in Section 3. We wanted to break apart and kind of reorganize some of the matters, so to speak, that would be included as FPAC's mission of activities and research. So we took a stab at that. And then, again, just in the last section or so, to clean up a little bit more of what the functionality and products are for FPAC moving forward.
Thank you. And I just want to emphasize two things that I didn't mention before. One is there was some historical background information that, while educational is not necessary for inclusion in a charter of this type, so that was, as Ms. Herman said, condensed. And then finally, historically, FPAC had operated on a schedule of providing a mid-year report and an end-of-year report. In practice, that mid-year report was not being delivered I believe, in recent years. And the end-of-year report was of somewhat questionable utility because early in my tenure as CPDC chair, I learned that, before Ms. Szymanski, this does not apply to Ms. Szymanski, but before that, the people who were in charge of facilities were not reading the year-end reports. And so even though it's an advisory committee to the school board, the head of facilities should be reviewing this important committee year-end report. And so, working with Ms. Herman and Ms. Hozick, the deputy chair or vice chair of FPAC, we determined that a more productive method of communication or reporting to the school board is on an ad hoc basis. There'll still be a year-end report, but we identified the need as we are undertaking a real focus on addressing the long-term infrastructure, maintenance, renovation, construction issues facing our school system. We need something more than an annual report. And so having memos delivered throughout the course of the year that are timely, targeted, and informative to the school board and to facilities, providing that critical link between industry and the school system so that we are not acting in isolation, but instead being informed continuously by people who are connected, not just as independent experts, but through their own networks, have access to a vast range of information and expertise. Those memos serve a critical function that was previously missing. And so that is also a function of these revisions, and will provide critical ongoing support to the school board as it considers different issues within the facilities domain. Did you have any further comments on that, Ms. Herman?
No, your point about transitioning away from one annual report that's delivered in May or June to a process where every couple months the hope and expectation is that memos would be provided on a particular topic to the school board is an accurate reflection of FPAC's attempt to be nimble on particular topics as well and more responsive to the school board's requests.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to partner with you and Ms. Hozick and the committee members, many of whom are new this year, which is exciting, reflecting a broad degree of expertise. Are there questions from Ms. Dixit or Dr. Anderson or Mr. McDaniel about the revisions that are proposed in this red line? Oh, Mr. McDaniel?
Thank you. I'm generally fine with this. Everything looked good, and I appreciate the explanation. Just a couple of, I guess, technical questions. I think PEC went through a rather lengthy process a few months ago, earlier last year, to kind of update advisory board handbook. Was this update a result of that, done in conjunction with that, or was that a part of that process, what does in conjunction? I was just kind of curious about the impetus for the update.
I'll offer one word, and then I'll turn over to Ms. Herman. I believe it was that was one impetus for it, but it was also when I became CPDC chair and talking with Ms. Herman and FPAC members. It was clear from the early months that in recent years, both with the head of facilities, again, not Ms. Szymanski, but previous heads of facilities, not reading FPAC reports, the members of FPAC expressed, and Ms. Herman can elaborate, that FPAC was not being utilized as it should be by the school board. And there was a sense of disconnect between FPAC, the school board, and facilities. And people questioning whether they should continue their involvement. And at a time when we're facing all these facilities-related challenges, a desire to transform FPAC to become more useful and more engaged with the school board, and at the same time, the school board seeking more input from FPAC. So these changes respond more to that rather than to the PEC changes to that manual. But I'll also ask for Ms. Herman to respond.
Yes, sure. And that's a great question. And again, I think Member Dunn did a really nice job summarizing what the thought process has been over the past year or so. We did, FPAC has done some soul searching, some conversations, and strategic thinking about the focus of FPAC moving forward, hence some of the other changes in the proposed charter. But again, additionally, the hope is changing the work product, which is an important change here in this proposed charter edit, would allow FPAC to work more quickly, to be more responsive to the school board. We felt like we were honestly getting to a point where the school board only hearing from FPAC in a written format once a year with actual substantive recommendations maybe was a little too long of a term to wait for feedback and recommendations from this group. So we wanted to try to change up the format so we could try to be a little bit more quicker with our response and recommendations so that the school board could hopefully be armed with the information they're requesting.
And I'll just add, I think fundamentally this is an organization, FPAC, that has incredible expertise, connections, resources available at their fingertips, but it had not been structured appropriately to provide maximum utility and benefits to the school board. And I'll say also the relationship with facilities, in my view, my opinion only, had deteriorated over time. And I think under Ms. Szymanski's leadership, previously the head of facilities did not always attend FPAC meetings, but Ms. Szymanski made a personal commitment to attend every FPAC meeting, and I believe that has transformed the relationship between FPAC and facilities. Even though FPAC is a school board advisory committee, I believe that it can act essentially as a source of continuous expertise to Ms. Szymanski as well. Do you have any comments on that, Ms. Szymanski?
Nope, no comments. That's correct in my view as well.
Thank you for the question. Any other questions, Mr. McDaniel?
Just a couple of others real quick. They'll be rapid. They'll be yes or no's for the most part. And I assume that FPAC, did you guys vote to approve these changes?
Well, so we have taken a couple meetings to go through some red line discussions, points that we felt like would be available to be up for change. Emailed versions went back and forth between FPAC members and the folks who were working on the red line edits, in which, Member Dunn and others, I came to CPDC in October and presented a previous draft as well. So there's been quite a bit of opportunity since September for comment and feedback. Again, in FPAC's view, this charter is the school board's charter for FPAC. So these are FPAC's recommendations for the school board to consider on this document. If the school board decides to make changes to the document, that is within your authority and right. In our opinion, we are here for you, and this is your document. We did not take a final vote on this version at our meeting on Tuesday because, again, this could have additional edits further down the line through this process that we're undertaking this year. If a vote is needed by FPAC to pass a draft along, we can do that at our February meeting. That's no problem. But again, these are just considerations for the school board. This is FPAC's, marching orders from the board, so.
Right, no, I appreciate that. What I want to make sure is that if, we do move forward and the board approves it, we're not going to have FPAC members coming and saying, well, wait a minute, we didn't vote on this. So I want to make sure that I want to make sure that you guys with your FPAC internal process, you've done what you need to do to get your members on board with these changes. That's kind of what I'm asking, whether that's a vote or consensus or whatever it may be.
Ms. Herman, do you feel that this red line and clean version reflect a consensus of FPAC?
I mean, I do. I will say that I only received written comments from one FPAC member. Everyone else seemed to provide an okay, either verbal during a meeting or by not submitting written comments. I have to assume that this is moving forward.
But this was discussed at the most recent FPAC meeting last week, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, versions have been sent out for sure, right, yes. So, and again, we are free to have the ability to review and edit, and members can bring up topics as they feel. We have member time during each of our meetings, so those conversations were possible.
Okay. And it's kind of a similar question. Is staff, are you okay with these changes? Have you reviewed them?
From the staff perspective, we are good with these changes, but again, we'll defer to the school board.
Sure. And a comment, there was a lot of redlining in the background section. It doesn't really matter to me. I don't want to get this granular, but I would kind of suggest the background section maybe just eliminated because it's history, it's not necessary, and just to kind of keep a clean document of how FPAC operates. But again, if this is what FPAC is kind of okay with, then that's fine with me. And last question, and this isn't specifically to the charter, but because membership is mentioned in the charter, is it worth putting in there that members of FPAC are subject to certain disclosures and making it pretty clear that they cannot accept, I think they can't accept contracts or they can't be involved with the contracting process? Is it kind of worth putting some verbiage in there to that effect? And maybe that's a question for staff, but that was one thing that did jump out to me.
I believe that when people submit their application to FPAC, and Kevin, if you have input to provide, I know that before you get formally appointed, you have to sign certain documents that a conflict of interest,
Yeah, it's
I don't know how it's
This
termed,
one?
a statement or commitment, and I think that's also part of the application process, isn't that right?
Right. So as part of the application process, applicants sign a disclosure. It's also included in the policy that the school board revised that FPAC members are subject to certain disclosure requirements as well as the conflict of interest provision.
So my only concern about putting it in the charter is if school board evolves its conflict of interest rules and policy, then it may create a mismatch at some point in time. So having it where it is right now, and do you know what the school board policy is that governs the conflict of interest, FPAC?
Let me look it up real quick.
Yeah, maybe just putting something in there. I mean, I don't want to like wordsmith things, but because if the public is looking up this charter and they go to membership, it might be beneficial to have a line that says members of FPAC are subject to conflict of interest. The school board's conflict of interest policy, and then insert the policy number, which references back to the policy. That would really be my only suggestion from a substantive perspective.
Can you say it again, because I was writing it down?
Sorry, in the membership section, something to the effect that all members of FPAC are subject to the school board's conflict of interest policy, and then insert that policy title and number, just so it's really clear and it kind of calls attention to that fact.
Okay. Could you make a motion to that effect, or do you want me to?
I would move to amend the membership section of the draft to insert a reference to the fact that all members of FPAC are subject to the school board's conflict of interest policy. I think that's a sufficient motion, and I'll leave staff to kind of wordsmith that.
Okay. Can I make? Oh, are you still there? Okay. Are you bringing it up? Well, no, I think it's just one sentence. You already state what the words are. Just so we can then make a motion to forward it to the school board for approval. I think you have to scroll up. It's section 5, Roman numeral 5, right there. So it should read, all members of FPAC are subject to the school board's conflict of interest policy, comma.
Yeah, the school boards, and then you can insert the title and the numerical reference, whatever that is. I don't have it in front of me. And that, I think that will be fine. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah, so it's conflict of interest policy, comma, policy 17.
So to clarify, the school board has its own conflict of interest policy. There's also a conflict of interest section in policy in 1710. Do you want both references?
Whichever one applies to FPAC members.
Okay.
Yeah, whichever one or two, both. Yeah. Yeah, because, and I think it's important on this one in particular because we are, rightfully so, we're engaging industry experts. And, when you engage industry experts with these conversations, and you also have obviously a very healthy capital budget, I think we should kind of go a little bit above and beyond just to call out the fact that, there's nothing, everything is above board, and there's nothing going on here.
You can just say policy 1710 and close parentheses. You don't have to cite the specific section. You make interest is capitalized, can you make it? Put a space between membership and in the title of section 5. Okay, Mr. McDaniel, can you repeat your motion and just propose the specific?
I'll read this sentence. So I move to amend section 5 to add the sentence, all members of FPAC are subject to the school board's conflict of interest policy for community advisory board members, policy 1710.
Is there a second? Okay, all in favor? Sorry, the second was Ms. Dixit. Sure, discussion? Dr. Anderson? No. Okay. Any comments? No? Okay, all in favor?
We're doing just for this motion, right? I still have question on the.
Yeah, just
Okay, I got
adding
it,
the
yeah.
sentence. Okay, it's unanimous. Okay, further discussion, Ms. Dixit?
Yes, I have some questions about this too. So I wanted to ask about how this document came about. Like, was it the entire FPAC team discussing and then doing it with a subcommittee in some members of FPAC?
So for this iteration of the edits,
Yes.
we had myself as chair and the vice chair. We collaborated on some potential changes. We also solicited early feedback from Member Dunn, who again is the school board member liaison to FPAC. And an initial draft was put together with red lines that was emailed to all of the FPAC members. I don't remember when, sometime in September or October. We talked about those changes during our FPAC meeting, I believe in October. Also November, it was on the agenda. And then a couple iterations were emailed out to the entire FPAC membership. So we didn't have a subcommittee, so to speak, but all members were emailed the draft versions along the way, and could have responded in email with comments or brought it up at our meetings.
Okay. The reason I ask is because on the page 2, it says the below matters are within the purview of FPAC as determined by the school board and include, and there are 8 items under that. Did you get the direction from school board to add these as a list?
No. This list, again, is a draft of what FPAC members believe could be our kind of mission for activities. So if there are comments and feedback on this list of 8 items, we're more than happy to, take that into consideration and reroute a draft or have a separate conversation about it.
Yeah, the only reason I ask is on number 7, construction financing and procurement. How is FPAC being advisory committee and not part of any of the staff who reviews the construction plans? Is it something you have, like FPAC has access to, all the contracts and financing and procurement?
We do not have access to all of that. There are certain components of school facility construction financing that we've looked at in the past per request or direction from school board members or because of a topic that touched on that the school board had asked us to look into. An example would be the request we had last year to look at different types of contracting mechanisms and provide our feedback via a memo, which was included in our annual report last year. So we don't have access to everything, but we do have research and industry experience in which we draw on and certainly bounce questions off of staff when appropriate. But again, if this is a topic that the school board would like FPAC to research or provide feedback on in the future, including this item number 7 allows FPAC to essentially do that.
Great. Yeah, that's good to know, and that's what I was thinking about. Like, maybe it's like a more of a broader procurement process, and that is the removal of CIP from the list was done to keep it comprehensive, like keep it like general, because I know CIP is one of our main focus, and we are any 5-year plan. So. Is that one of the things we're like redlined on that? Maybe you could just, Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so the reason why we struck out the specific term or phrase of capital improvement plan is because, for one thing, referring to another document that may ebb and evolve and may not be called a CIP at some point in the future, may be called something else. We want to be cognizant of that. Plus, we think that pretty much all of the items 1 through 7 are included in some way, shape, or form in the CIP. So we felt like from an activity standpoint, it's been years, probably more than 7 years since we've actually been asked to look at something specifically related to the CIP, a portion of that document, more as it's been a request to look at a component of the CIP that folds into the improvement plan that FCPS has.
If I can also mention, number 5, that's in the red line, references long-term planning, prioritization, and visioning of construction, renovations, and investments. I think that's as you said, Ms. Dixit, the broader category beyond just the one document.
Okay. I think my last question is about the membership and length of terms. In the prior version, we had more specific information about their 30 members and one from each district. Is it removed for a reason, or it was just to keep it concise? Number 5 is membership and length of terms.
I'm sorry, I don't see that the text, the only changes I see in Article 5 is eliminating the reference to chairman with chair, and then replacing the reference to Department of Facilities and Transportation Services staff with Office of the Chief of Facility Services and Capital Programs. Those are the only red line changes I see. Oh, from the original, I apologize.
Okay.
Well, and I will also add that FPAC has a bylaws document that talks about the number of appointments we have, an initial term, how the appointments, how long, the length of each term, and how that's determined by school board members and such. So, we have another more procedures document which is our bylaws document, but.
Yeah, I agree, but it should still say that the member of, committee members are there. In general, it just says, it shall include chair of the Comprehensive Planning Development Committee and the staff of school. And they both are non-voting advisory members, something like that. But it doesn't say anything about all the people part of it.
Would you like to make a motion to restore the first paragraph from the current version of the charter?
I would just say we could just say the FPAC should have advisory members along. If we do, like Dr. Anderson was saying, that we have it in the advisory committee handbook, the more detailed version.
Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion for the current approved version of the charter dated February 19th, 2015, that we insert in section 5, the first paragraph of the current charter, which states, the FPAC shall consist of 13 members, 1 from each of the 9 Fairfax County magisterial districts, 3 at-large representatives, and 1 representative from the city of Fairfax. Each shall be appointed for 3-year terms using the process defined in the current version of Policy 1710. Do I have a second? Yes?
Okay.
Or is that a question? A second, okay.
I'm seconding, but I also have
Okay.
questions on that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm done.
Oh, no, I just want to have a question. I'd like to have clarity. States.
And, Mr. McDaniel, do you have your hand up? Well, Kevin?
Yeah, I had a question. I didn't know if Dr. Anderson was, I don't think her mic was on. I didn't know if she was talking or not.
No, it wasn't. Sorry,
Oh,
my
okay.
apologies.
So
Oh, I did have a question on the table that they're looking for.
Yeah.
okay. So is it my turn or is it Dr. Anderson's turn?
I was just hoping to get a sense of what policy 17, because we're making a reference to it, or its most current version, and it feels a little bit in the dark. So I'd like to have that. But I also want to have my general turn about some other questions that I had.
Okay. I had a specific question on the motion because I'm kind of a little confused here. So my understanding was the redlined version was an exact copy of the February 15th, of the version dated February 19th, 2015, and then that was redlined, which that would be the definition of redline version. However, if you go to the February 19th, 15 version, the membership section in that version versus this redlined, versus the baseline on the red line is completely different. So it's not a redline version.
That's exactly the point. This is.
I'm a little confused, and I'm not assigning any blame, I'm just so now I'm kind of thinking, well, wait a minute, if we've recreated, if this redline version is a recreation of the February 19, 2015 version, do I now need to give this more scrutiny and read it line by line? Because what else is different?
Ms. Herman, can you address that?
I think it's just an editorial error on,
That's a pretty significant editorial error. That's pretty significant. That's not like, a capital letter or a comma. That's pretty significant, and I'm not comfortable with that. I'll just be very honest. And it just jumped out at me because I kind of took it at face value that it was a red line. But that's a pretty significant difference, and I'm not comfortable with that.
So, can I want to allow Dr. Anderson to ask her questions, but
That was all. That was all.
I'll just mention, perhaps Dr. Anderson can ask her questions, and then we can table this for the next meeting of CPDC. Maybe FPAC can take a vote on it in between. And when it comes back, it can be the original existing version of the charter with a red line. And, I mean, there's a lot that looks similar or the same, but it does look like there are pieces that are different, and I'm not quite sure where it got lost. But anyhow, that can be figured out for the next meeting. But Dr. Anderson?
Yes, actually, you covered one of the points that I wanted to share. One, Section 5, I think, and again, this is a tiny thing, I'm just going to go in order, where we talked about chairman being changed to chair. It just seems to be inconsistent because on the following page, we've made references to both the chairman of the Fairfax County School Board and City of Fairfax School Board.
it may be that I don't have all the right terminology
Okay.
since I'm
So
not an
maybe-
FCPS employee,
Yeah.
so I'll
Maybe just keeping everything as
Look at
chairman.
that a little bit more.
It just seems to make sense, so that's one. The second point I wanted to make is I do think we need to just take this back, and you just mentioned it to the group for a vote, even if it was cursory, even if we agreed with everything here, because it resolves a lot of issues. Once people put their hand up, or however it is that you vote, it just really affirms their position rather than assuming their positions. We want it to be explicit and avoid any future thing down the line. Question that I had regarding the reference section. Give a little bit more detail if you have it, because I know this was already, the reference section was already there as to the utility of that section, because I'm just kind of thinking back to the charter or bylaws. Well, maybe it's because this is not bylaws, this is your charter. I may be answering my own question, but I do want to hear your thoughts with the need for the references section.
It was a carryover from the 2015 version, and I think we just felt like it was worth keeping, just to make sure that it's clear what policies or other related documents on our procedures still apply.
Sure, absolutely, that makes sense. The other thing that I wanted to ask, on the red line section, this is on page 1, under background, number 1, the need for increased public awareness, does that show up anywhere else? Like that sentiment of increasing public awareness? Because I was,
In terms of, that is included as part of the historical reference as to part of the reason why CPDC was, created, I believe, with a connection to FPAC there. So,
it just,
and then there are some references to making sure that public input is collected, but we do that through, our website feedback, through our public meetings, the fact that FPAC meetings are open to the public, that, our email addresses are available for sending comments from the public. Obviously, we're not holding our own meetings on these topics aside from our FPAC monthly meetings.
I just wonder, because these advisory committees, all of them are to advise the board. But it's also an opportunity, well, not an opportunity, its purpose also is to be essentially like a watchdog organization on the system. because especially FPAC, where we have collected such expertise, it becomes even more important, just like we do with some other committees. There's no one on ACSD that wasn't dissatisfied with something that was happening in the system, and they've come in to kind of be the eyes and ears of the community to inform the school board that there's more happening beyond what we can see and understand in our scope. So I find the need to really stress that there, because it gives the public a place to reach out to in addition to the school board.
And just looking through this on, I don't know what page number it is, sorry, but
Yeah,
in
it's okay.
section 6, item number E, it says, this is in the context of FPAC members may be asked to interact and communicate with the school board and community in public venues such as work sessions, community and focus group meetings.
Sure, but if we could somewhere in the mission, which is essentially for me a mission/purpose, include some language on that, I think that would be very helpful. I think there is some space to, when you go back to the original document, and to make sure that the red line is full. I think for us and our work, before just, placing this in front of the school board to vote, that, one, we have the FPAC members vote on this, then it comes back to CPDC, maybe, Mr. Dunn, that we parse out conversations for the 4 of us or the 5 of us. No, it's just Dr. Pritchett, that's the other member, right? It's just the 4 of us from Fairfax County on this committee.
Right. So it's
I
the
thought we were
4 of
for
us.
some
It
reason.
is with Carolyn Pitches. That's
Oh,
5.
oh, okay.
And Mr. McDaniel on the.
So then the
video.
4 of us could have some conversations with our colleagues in advance to bring their feedback into this discussion, because we're not going to have a work session on this, but we want to make sure people are comfortable and not having a space where we're returning this yet again. But that's a future activity once we have what is going to be happening with FPAC come back to us. And I think that's it for me right now.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Dr. Anderson, and perhaps, Ms. Herman, if you can provide the red line against the original at your earliest convenience with the 2 changes that we discussed today, that first paragraph from the original charter with the correct citation to whatever, if it is 1710, and you can, Mr. Jackson should be able to tell you.
So we haven't voted on that second motion yet.
Oh, no, we're not on the point where we're going to vote on this today because we have to table it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but you would still have to withdraw the motion before moving on
Okay,
to another.
I withdraw my motion then.
May I say one more thing?
Yes.
In my haste to just get through my comments, I do want to say thank you to Ms. Herman for all of your work in trying to get us streamlined. I think we kind of missed that part of the conversation when we first started, because we know it's not easy to get this work started, knowing that you were not working with the full complement of FPAC members. So thank you for taking this and for your work.
Yes, I'd like to echo that. Thank you, Ms. Herman, for that. And with that, we will send this back to FPAC for revisions, vote, and if we can receive a red line that addresses Ms. Dixit's comments and Mr. McDaniel's comments, the two changes that Ms. Dixit and Mr. McDaniel discussed, to have that get a vote by FPAC would be great. And if you don't mind circulating that by email, and we can share that with our colleagues and have some discussions, and we can work that out maybe after the meeting, Dr. Anderson. Okay, I'd like to move on to the next agenda item, 1.07, Public-Private Partnerships Report, which was posted on board docs. Ms. Szymanski, could you, along with the staff response, could you walk through the report and the staff response so we have a better understanding of this important report?
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. And if it's all right with you, I think it would be best to just start with an overall timeline of work done to date with staff, because this work launched with FCPS staff back in February 2020, 24 as a part of the initial follow-on motion in the CIP from fiscal year 25-29. I believe the school board had directed staff to look at cost efficiencies, and part of that include public-private partnerships. We then took information gained from Prince George's County Public Schools and their P3 program. Staff also interviewed developers with this experience, as well as interviewing construction management, project management consulting firms with this experience. The result was a report delivered to the board in April 2024, and it really spoke at that high level on what a P3 is, some of the considerations, the county's use of P3s. We walked through the Prince George's program, sort of as that precedent model. We shared how the solicitation was done and some of that beginning framework that they used. And then we also kind of gave some highlights from their phase 1 package on how big it was, the annual costs for them and the terms. And from there, also provided a few other research documents that we collected along the way as an appendix. From there, in April 2024, or I'm sorry, in May 2024, the school board, as part of a budget follow-on motion, directed staff to conduct further investigation in the P3 work and include a cost-benefit analysis. So that was recently presented to the board, and I believe you all have a copy of that report. Given the cost-benefit analysis piece, it's quite technical, so we actually decided to, as staff, build a framework for guiding a consultant to do the cost-benefit analysis itself. We wanted to make sure we had a team that had done this before and had that technical expertise. However, we did want to make sure that that was guided and aligned with FCPS's needs for the division. So we started that by creating a little bit of a framework and summary. We took a look at what we think we could use as a model to do the cost-benefit analysis. And as you know, we have a lot of initiatives going on at FCPS. We have a new renovation queue, other strategic initiatives, but we wanted to give some kind of real data and real schools for the consultant to do the benefit analysis on. So we decided to take the remaining schools in the current renovation queue. We didn't do the first two because we figured design is loading in FY25. Those will be well underway on our current program, but we said, hey, what if we skipped out a couple schools and then did the remainder from there? And it just so happens that was about 6 schools. And then we took the Silver Line Elementary. Again, we wanted to do a model where it was maybe a new program, and that's the one school in the CIP that had dedicated land that a consultant could do the benefit analysis and have a little bit more data to do that work. And it's kind of nice, the result was a group of 7 schools, and with Prince George's County, they had their first phase be 6 schools and their second phase be 8 schools. So we figured this was a really good place to start as FCPS on a scope of work, kind of in the middle of the precedent that we see in this area, and it's all schools that we know to be true needing future work as it pertains to the current CIP. So from there, we gave that to our consultant. They provided a benefit analysis. They did 2 different ways of looking at the P3 package, a design, build, finance model. That's where they would be the financer and we would pay over a term, and then they would in turn design and build the school projects. The other option they did was a design, build, finance, and light operations. So that one is the same as the design, build, finance, but it also included additional work to be performed on those 7 facilities over the course of 30 years. Now, there's many ways you can slice and dice it. We wanted to kind of go in that middle of the road. I believe the initial follow-on motion said no reduction in staff should be considered in the benefit analysis. So we kind of de-scoped a lot of that routine maintenance, but we added in the typical infrastructure repairs that you would typically do under those 30 years after you build the building per manufacturer's recommendations for things like HVAC, roofing, electrical equipment, so on and so forth. The other big thing that we considered when doing this was swing space. Now, it wasn't explicitly said in the follow-on motion, but we really wanted that to be considered when doing this work. Well, one, it creates a lot more scope. If you're doing a benefit analysis on just 7 schools or 7 schools and building 7 swing sites along with them. You know, it could change the size of the package. And 2, regardless of whether we pursue the work, knowing more about those sites in our queue and what the potential could be for swing, we thought beneficial. So we did some of that, and as a result, for both the design build finance framework and the design build finance light operations, they developed kind of 3 different options. So one of the options looked more at your traditional phased occupied renovation, which FCPS has historically done. One of the options looks at those same 7 schools, but more of them are new construction and opportunities as part of that swing space analysis, where they figured we could do an on-site swing where there was enough acreage reasonably to put a new school up while the existing school's in operation, and then go back and demolish the old building once the new one's up and running. And then they did advise, from their market sounding, they wanted to look at a package that was a little bit smaller. They saw a lot of benefit in those schools with the on-site swing. They got a lot of great market feedback that developers were very interested in doing those types of projects. So they said, hey, let's do a third option that kind of takes out some of the schools where that's not possible and just focus on 4 of those schools where we could do the on-site swing, just to make it more advantageous to the marketplace. So those are the 3 options, and again, we did them for a design build finance model and a design build finance light operations model. From there, we submitted the report, so you guys all have access to that. We did provide a staff response. So again, we thought there were definite strengths to the work the consultant did. You know, it was nice to get that market insight. They did a lot of market sounding and research, reached out to a lot of developers and folks that have done this. They did take a look at our ed specs and our sustainability goals, and they made sure that was all incorporated into the basis of assumptions for their work. You know, things that we saw where we might want to continue the work further. The 2 models that they provided, they did different leasing terms. So one was like a shorter term and one was a longer term. We understand why they did that. They wanted to provide us some variety. But if you really wanted to stack the 2 up when you're making that decision, we might recommend doing, if we're more interested in a longer term, we might want to match the other model with that longer term as well. You know, overall, we thought between options 1 and 2, because they both looked at the 7 same schools, they both would result in 7 schools that meet ed specs. So we would recommend, having that said, option 2 was more cost effective than option 1. So if, again, we were to narrow down some of that work, we would recommend looking at option 2 over option 1, because it's less expensive and a greater portion of the funding is going directly into the cost of the building of doing work and less into doing on-site trailers. We still think option 3 could be considered as well, because it's a little bit different in scope. It's that 4 schools, and so, you know, we recommend, if we were to pursue, continuing to look at option 2 and option 3. Option 2 completes a much larger scope of needed work, but it's more expensive, so understanding financial availability will be important for moving that forward. And then just some things that we felt that are specific to FCPS that the consultant does as a outside perspective, we wanted to bring to light just what we know about FCPS to say a P3 could be beneficial for just the financial need. So we know all about that big red circle and the current backlog that we have. So we know that the funding is often like the biggest thing preventing us from doing more work. So just having this type of program that gives us a little bit more financial flexibility could be a potential benefit for our work, while we would still be able to use the referendum money that we receive as part of bond sales to keep our typical capital improvement programming, and this could supplement it. You know, we see a lot of benefit to that, not just for our renovation cycle, but I think, as I mentioned in that Tuesday work session, that a lot of the maintenance backlog and jet goal work, it's all tied together. So because of our major backlog need, this could also be a potentially a good solution, whether we go the design build finance or the design build light operations, because it's all tied together. And again, with that, that's a pretty high level overview, but I'm available to answer any questions. And as we get deeper into the work, I'm happy to bring staff at future meetings, or maybe the consultant, just if there's specific questions, just let me know where the board is falling on this, and I'm happy to bring them to the table.
Mr. Dunn, before we get started, may I ask a quick question? Because I want to get a sense of what is our goal for this discussion this evening as per these documents? If you could set the stage a little bit, that would be helpful.
That's actually what I was going to do. So, great minds think alike. So thank you so much, Ms. Szymanski. I would like to solicit the feedback from CPDC members about where we should go based on this document. I want to be sensitive to bandwidth of staff, so we'll definitely be seeking input from Ms. Szymanski. As she said, we have a lot of strategic initiatives, big changes going on, school boundaries, and so forth. But I believe what the work session illustrated in a very holistic way is that the needs of our system far exceed our resources. And this report is excellent, and the staff response, the way I read it, it sounds enthusiastic. Is that a fair characterization?
Sure, we think it's worth definitely more exploring, given the unique position that FCPS is in.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate the clarification. And so to build on Ms. Szymanski's comments, the question is, how do we go about exploring this? I think in the work session, Ms. Marin stated correctly that this is something that will require multiple work sessions. And so the initial framing question I would like to propose to my colleagues is I would like to get consensus, not immediately, but after we have some discussion about, which, if we are to make a request coming out of CPDC to the chair and vice chair of the school board for a work session or 2 or 3 work sessions, what are the topics that we would request for each work session? And so that is, if you could please have that in mind as we're engaging in questions. I might propose one approach could be, I think swing spaces based on this report and what's on board docs is actually a shorter version than the full follow-on motions report that was provided by facilities to the board. So if you haven't reviewed the entire document, please do so. But the swing spaces discussion I found highly illuminating, and the swing spaces has relevance not just to public-private partnerships, but how we do construction and renovation generally, with different options being, trailer farms on site, number 1. Number 2, building a brand-new building adjacent to the existing building, and then at the end of, once the new building is completed, demoing the existing building. And number 3, having an off-site location where you, basically move a student population to that temporary site for a couple years while construction is ongoing. There are complexities to all of these questions, and I'm sure Mr. McDaniel is highly attuned to some of these in terms of, how many people on site, right? So there's a permitting issue that would have to be worked out with the county, right? Density of development, but that density of development issue would be short-term in nature, temporary, and I think could likely be worked out in a collaborative environment. And likely, we wouldn't have to be the first ones to run that gauntlet. We could look at how has that been addressed in other jurisdictions nationwide. So one work session, I believe, should focus on swing spaces because right now a major cause of higher construction costs and longer construction timeframes is the phased construction approach we use where students remain in the building while we're renovating it. It increases costs, increases timeframes. We need to address that and move away from phased construction. in my belief. A second work session, and I'm not proposing these in a particular order, but just conceptually. A second work session, I believe, should focus on public-private partnerships. And I don't think it will be all resolved in one work session, but I believe there needs to be greater education provided to the board about public-private partnerships and a presentation on the different options that were examined in the study and the staff response to it. For me, the most noteworthy piece of information in this report is Table 1, which is on page 33 of the report. And Table 1 shows that for the 7 schools that were considered, with 6 elementary schools and 1 middle school, Package 2, the design and construction costs are virtually the same with our existing approach, which is design bid build, and the public-private partnership, a difference of $639.9 million versus $640.9 million, so a difference of only $1 million and around $640 million total cost. And the swing costs is lower with the public-private partnership, $60.1 million compared to $71.6 million with our existing approach that we're using right now for all of our construction projects. Now, there are additional costs such as financing, but and how you do a public-private partnership. Is it just financing? Is it light operational? Is it maintenance? And then over what duration? I believe that the staff response properly highlights that they prefer a 30-year time frame for paying off the private financing costs, which is what most people use with their home mortgage, as opposed to the 4-year time frame that was suggested in this report. And I can say I have experience with public-private partnerships, and I've never seen a 4-year payback period because it negates most of the benefits of actually going to the private sector for financing. So, I believe this study is useful. There are issues that would need to be addressed, and those are highlighted in the staff response. But having a work session, at least an initial work session on public-private partnerships, perhaps we could also build in some consideration of the guidelines that facilities and legal work together to prepare, and I believe is desired to have those appended to an existing school board policy 8240. Would be useful. And it will likely take multiple public-private partnership work sessions over a significant amount of time to get the board comfortable to authorize this to be done, but at least it would provide direction for this, facilities to understand the consensus of the school board as to next steps. And finally, a third work session I think may be worth exploring is looking at construction management at risk and design build as alternative construction management procurement approaches, because facilities has provided to Dr. Reed, and has Dr. Reed now provided to the chair of governance committee?
I'll have to check with Dr. Reed on where she is in working with governance, but staff have provided a redlined policy 8240 that now allows for construction manager at risk and design build construction methods.
Thank you. So those are 2 new approaches that that are common in the construction industry, correct, Ms. Szymanski?
Yes, especially for K-12 work in this DMV area.
Okay, so those are common for this area, but FCPS continues to rely on what I understand to be an outdated approach to construction management and procurement, which is called design bid build, not to be confused with design build. Those are, that red line policy 8240 will be considered by governance, but without having a work session on these approaches, I'm not sure that we will gain the confidence of our school board colleagues to adopt these new methodologies, which should, in my understanding, reduce costs, reduce construction timeframes, and build a more unified approach rather than sequential approach to construction. But again, I want to open the floor. That was a long answer to your question, Dr. Anderson, but I do have And, a fourth work session, it may not be an entire work session, is leased office space. I believe Ms. Dixit and others during the work session on Tuesday talked about, are there opportunities to convert commercial office space to new school sites? And while the report only really focused on reducing existing leasing expenses for existing leased space, there are commercial office opportunities that may be worth exploring and getting further research. So those are 4 work sessions that could be held, and they don't all have to be held at once, but, and sequencing, I think, is open to discussion. But those are my thoughts, and so I'll open the floor to questions. Who'd like to go first? Oh, sorry. That's so formal. Dr. Anderson.
But that's why she brought them. Thank you so much for this. First of all, I do want to say there's a lot here. I've never highlighted and tabbed and put notes as much as I have with these reports, and I'm very excited by them. I think there's a lot of opportunity. The reason why I asked what is our purpose here this evening, it's because I didn't want to get into things that this is not the right forum to get into, which is potentially most of my questions. One of the things that I want to be mindful of, having sat in the seat of the chair, is the time. I know this is an important thing. It is a very vital thing. I just think, given that we are already in our work mode, it would be potentially very challenging to carve out 4 separate work sessions. I do feel, however, that we do need to chunk this work, because this is a lot. Not only do we want to build understanding with the school board, we also want to build understanding with the community. And we have to make sure that we are well-versed in this so that we can go out into the community and have those conversations, because there will be a lot of questions if we proceed on this route, because this is new. And people want to feel as if, one, we're getting the best possible bang for our buck, and that we're being fiscally responsible. And so I do think we need to take the approach of really going deep into building understanding, rather than just having a cursory review of this information across the board. I don't have any issue with the components that you've outlined. But I'm wondering, in terms of timing, if we could include, outside of maybe an overall introduction at our typical work sessions that we have here, but I wonder if we could consider the same approach that we have considered for the strategic plan updates, where we have conversation at the public meetings where more of the public is actually watching, where we could chunk these small pieces and have I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Some updates, some status, some opportunity to learn, small chunks at a time in a manageable way that it gives us enough time in between to be reflective, to be thoughtful, and most importantly, to gather the questions from the community, because we are representatives. I'm not here just to talk about Ricardi's thoughts. I'm here to talk about the thoughts of all of the Mason District. And there's not a single person who I can think of in my community that's going to read these heavy documents and be able to, without thoughtful engagement and walking us through all of this information, to be able to give me feedback on what they feel, we need to consider as a board. So I definitely would like to put forward a request for chunking the work, and with time in between for us to be able to engage with community and come back with thoughtful questions that they may have, because we don't come up with all of this on our own. Some of us have more expertise in some areas than others. The two of you are who I consider to be the procurement experts. I said this before, in a meeting, and I've learned quite a bit from what you have asked on those matters. But I also will want to go back and ask other people, does this make sense? Because I can't trust my own thinking on this, because it's so outside of my wheelhouse. But I do want to engage in this work in a thoughtful way. And I also want to be mindful of the timetable that's even outlined on this. Even if we were to move on this tomorrow, we are years away. And I want to be mindful to not overly extend that period, but to take advantage of what we do have available. I think we're a little bit in a groove, and I've said this before, and this is not your responsibility, that the strategic updates that we get at the board meetings, they're not as relevant as they were a year or so ago. Or do they have to be at every meeting or every other meeting? I can't call the cadence, recall the cadence at this point. But maybe once a month or once every 2 months, we come with a small chunk of this for the foreseeable, next few months, because I do know that time is tight on the calendar of work sessions. And again, I'm not against having ed work sessions. If we could get it, great. My only worry about that, it's not as visible to people who come into our meetings on Thursdays. So I'll stop there for right now.
Ms. Dixit? Mr. McDaniel?
I don't know if Seema raised her hand first, but if she wants to go, I can go, whomever.
You can go first. That's all right.
Okay, thank you. I mean, what Dr. Anderson said pretty much sums up my thought. It's a lot. I printed off all the pages, and it's a very heavy binder that's starting to hurt my back. I'm carrying it around so much of all this stuff, and I'm slowly making my way through it. I'm a pretty big, and Dr. Anderson kind of alluded to this, I'm a pretty big fan of let's grab the low-hanging fruit that we can get now, and the rest of this we can kind of start working our way through. And of the topics that were thrown out, there's 2 that I would suggest we should move quickly on, or at least as quick as possible on. And that was the design build component. I've talked to my FPAC appointee about this. I think it's smart. It makes sense. And my understanding is there's already some draft language out there for us to pass a updated policy to at least let us look into it. So I'm fine with design build. I don't need to have a work session on it, but it may be a good idea if it's going to come to a board vote to at least put that on and have that conversation. But I'm fine. I'm a big proponent of design build. The second one that I think we should have a discussion about, and perhaps add a work session with design build, is the utilization of office space to relieve some pressure. We've been talking about Western High School for a long time. Is there opportunity to kind of take advantage of these vacant buildings that are sitting in the Dulles corridor, whether it's for a high school, a traditional high school, or a smaller magnet school that could then be used to take capacity, put it into the magnet school, and relieve pressure through other parts of the county. So I think that's a really important thing that, you can execute an office lease pretty quick. Building a building takes a long time, a decade, I think, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but generally a decade to build a high school. So I would recommend doing a work session on design, build, and office space, combine it into one, getting board approval and buy-in, and moving forward. P3, I have some questions on P3. But that's for a later conversation. And Dr. Anderson kind of alluded to it. Even if we approve P3 tomorrow, I'm thinking, 7 to 10 years before we would see a potential benefit, and that's really an eternity. If for no other reason than the economy is just going to be changing constantly. Swing space, I have some concerns on swing space, and Mr. Dunn, you kind of alluded to them. I don't know how willing the county is going to be to play ball with respect to adding more floor area ratio to an existing site and allowing us to temporarily use that. In a perfect world, this isn't an issue, but the Fairfax way might make this an issue. So I think the P3 and the swing space conversations, my suggestion would be maybe put those onto a back burner, but go full steam ahead on design, build, and office space. That's how I would kind of structure this conversation.
Ms. Dixit?
So, yeah, this is a lot to take in. And one of my questions is that this is excellent time for our FPAC committee to dive into it. I feel like they are the experts and then from the industry. And if we can get the recommendation to the board, and it could be, I think they'll understand it more than all of us. So I think we should that's what the expertise, I guess, matter for us is now. If FPAC can look at it and give us some advice and I know we got it from the staff already. So the second thing I want to say is this, the competition on this procurement method. Is it going to be the similar way we are doing procurement right now for construction project, or is it going to change?
Are you referring to the construction manager at risk and design build methods?
Yes.
It will be different. Currently, in a traditional design bid build method, you do an RFP to hire an architect. So you set up a technical panel and you select the one most qualified, and then you negotiate the price. They then design the drawings, they get them to a very complete manner, and then we issue that to the marketplace for a concealed bid. And then the vendor that comes in the lowest is selected, and that's how we get our builder on board. Construction manager at risk and design build are more of a best model where you would hire the builder also as an RFP. So in a construction manager at risk, you're still doing the architect separate. You hire them at the beginning. And then ideally, during early design, you issue an RFP for a construction manager, a builder, and you can review the proposals. You can base it on the qualifications they have and their resume of their staff. So you're not stuck with the lowest bidder. You're actually selecting them based on a certain set of criteria in that panel. From then, they advise on the design, they provide constructability reviews, they can help with the phasing, et cetera. And as part of the RFP, we will issue a guaranteed maximum price. So we'll say, hey, this renovation needs to be no more than $40 million, or whatever it might be. And so at a certain point, the drawings will be at a more developed stage, and we will dictate this. Maybe they're at the permit level. And then the construction manager will go out to the marketplace. They'll start getting their pricing from their subcontractors. And at that point, we negotiate and finalize the guaranteed maximum price. So you try to stick under that number that you issue in your RFP. Although, again, if you during the design process, you want to add more scope, so it usually ends up falling somewhere there. And then the architect may continue to design, so again, it's not always has to be a complete set. It's more about the scope of work that they need to guarantee a cap on, and then, yeah, you move into construction and go from there. Design build follows a similar best value model, except the architect is directly underneath the builder, so that you're hiring just one team. So you'll hire the builder, and as a sub-consultant, they'll have the architect. So you're kind of, you might consider the architect they choose as part of the selection criteria. You'll look at their qualifications as well. And so that means they're from day one on board, and then they have control over that architect to ensure that guaranteed maximum price is met. So again, similar in that you get to select your vendor based on qualifications, similar that you do a guaranteed maximum price for that best value model.
So, Jenny, why are we not doing that right now?
Well, I think the first thing is right now, school board policy doesn't allow for that. Right now, school board policy 8240 only allows for low bid construction. So right now we have no choice. And so our first step is getting that redlined copy in front of the board to adopt it. I think that there could be a lot of benefit that, because you don't have to necessarily pick and go forward and only do design, build, or construction manager at risk. It just gives you the option to, right? Because I personally think there's a right procurement method per project. Depends on how many inherent risks, how complex it is. If it's a really straightforward project, you might want to do low bid, right? But having, for this more nuanced construction, the more complex, especially with the phased occupied, just having someone on board earlier that builds buildings to advise on that, I think, is very beneficial, in addition to the cost component.
And that's how federal government does it, right? It's not the lowest bidder, because what happens with the lowest bidder is they come in, they get in, and now they have the project, and they just keep asking for more funding, and that 40 million becomes $80 million, and they have no choice, like basically you have to get the project finished. So I thought school board takes the policy from the Virginia, so we are kind of dependent on that, and Virginia state has the low bid procurement policy. So I think it has to change at the state level before we can change it. That's my understanding.
Yeah, it's a good point. I'm going to hopefully stay within my wheelhouse. VPPA has low bid as the preferred method. They do carve out provisions for these other
Okay.
types of methods, such as construction manager at risk and design build, but they stipulate that the local governing body will have to adopt and allow for that to happen. So part of that, in 8240 revisions, you'll see that in order for me to issue an RFP, I'm going to have to come to the school board, and the school board will have to approve and deem it permissible to use that method. I believe that's required per VPPA.
Oh, good to know that.
Yep.
I thought there was no option, but thank you for.
Yep.
So I'm also going again at just like Mr. Dunn, the federal government, the operation maintenance also comes into play where we like to, we're seeing the increasing cost of maintaining these buildings. And if we can, contract it out, I'm sure we'll see savings. And that's good in some of these analysis that it says design, build, finance, operation, maintain. Is that the part of the P3 private part is on page 36 of the report?
I believe it's pages 37 and 38 that look specifically at the design, build, finance, and then that light operations and maintenance.
Yeah, 36 only tells a little bit about their definition.
That's correct. Tables
Tables are on 37.
Yeah.
Right.
On 35 and 36, those two tables are for just the design, build, finance only.
Oh, okay.
On pages 37 and 38, that explores further the design, build, finance with light operations and maintenance.
This is through P3, or is it directly with DBFOM? Does it?
Both of these are P3 types.
Okay,
One just adds on that operations and maintenance component, the other one does not. We just wanted to provide some options.
I mean, I would love to go down this path at some point. I know today it's not possible, tomorrow is not possible, but I think as a board, we need to look into this because we are not going to get funding as we can continue to see the money is getting tight, and we do have to get creative. And this is a good option. Another thing, lastly, I wanted to ask about. I think I covered my question, but I just wanted to understand the how fast can we build these buildings if we go with the construction management process?
I do think you get a running start when you do this. So not to get too in the weeds, but one of the benefits of doing a guaranteed maximum price is at some point you got to negotiate the whole contract and shake hands on the 40 million. But what we could do is do what we would call maybe an early start agreement and maybe say, hey, I'm going to award, let's negotiate the first 5 million. Let's negotiate some foundation work so we can get started on just this while we're still figuring out the rest of the design. And once the design is more developed, you can shake hands on the remaining 35 to get you to that full 40. But it does open up the possibility of getting a vendor out there early to perform early work, and you can kind of get ahead of schedule while you're waiting on the designs to be fully developed. Again, I do think it's more specific to the design, so you got to have a situation where you can do that. I also want to caveat, we got to make sure we can get separated permits with the county, so there'll be some things that we need to work out to do that, but you can't do that with design, bid, build. You have to wait for the drawings to all be done and issued out to the marketplace.
Yeah, I understand. And I'm a big believer of this ceiling pricing, firm fixed price. Basically, you can't come back and ask me for more money. You just got to do the project in this funding. So if we move towards that, I think overall we'll see saving, even though if we don't change anything else, but just move to this procurement approach.
I agree. There's always opportunities for change orders for things that are completely unexpected, so I do want to caveat that.
I do understand. I've done those requests to government myself as a contractor, yeah.
Yeah, but you're right, because drawings are never 100% perfect. Just, guaranteeing that the ed specs will be completed for that, say, $40 million or whatever we decide, does kind of give you more of that insurance for things like that.
Okay, thank you so much.
I'll just speak a little bit, and I appreciate all the comments of my colleagues. I I think based on Mr. McDaniel's comments and Ms. Dixit's comments and Dr. Anderson's comments, I'd like to suggest that we could consolidate the 4 possible work sessions down to 2, with perhaps the most urgent one, the one that CPDC could recommend to the chair to occur first, to be one focused on the 2 new construction management approaches, design, build, and construction management at risk, combined with opportunities for commercial office space facilities being converted to schools. And a second work session to focus on public-private partnerships. I appreciate Mr. McDaniel's comment that it might be 7 to 10 years in the future, but I do want to just share from conversations at FPAC and presentations we've received, from my personal conversations with members of the school board in Prince George's County to understand how long it took for them to implement this approach. It was 2 to 3 years. Not 7 to 10. And this public-private partnerships are very well established around the world. UK, Australia, Canada do them all the time. Fairfax County does them all the time, as Mr. McDaniel knows, for Fairfax County Government Center and many other things. And we can build on the work of others without having to, build, we should borrow, beg, steal best practices from other jurisdictions. And we already have a head start because although it's not posted on board docs, included with the following motions report was a legal framework developed by the Office of Division Counsel with facilities to serve as to put together a framework by which the school board would actually consider and approve proposals from outside vendors for public-private partnerships. And that's consistent with Virginia legislation. So, and given the very dire outlook fiscally we have compared to the needs, the maintenance backlog, infrastructure backlog, and the continuing increases in the time frame for construction renovation, I don't think P3 can wait 7 to 10 years. I think it's something we should start exploring now so we can have that option. Doesn't mean we have to do them, but at least have that option, that tool in our toolbox to consider. So with that, Dr. Anderson, you asked for a go back.
Yes, I didn't speak about this explicitly because I was more speaking about the logistics. But I do want to say I think it's really important for us to explore the P3 options because what PG County was able to do, we cannot do that here. And we are not going to have anybody hand us $14 billion in order to modernize all of our buildings and to get the ones that are needed. We have been talking about office buildings for a number of years. I remember back in '22, Supervisor Walkinshaw talked about how there were so many office buildings that were vacant in Fairfax County. I said, well, you have a lot of office buildings. We need space for schools. Where's the conversation to marry those two? And so I think that's a really a relevant conversation to have, no matter what the structure of the pending school may be. Because we've seen what happened at Bailey's. And from what I understand, that was a very, very fast construction or renovation, whatever it is that's called. Whenever we have this conversation, I would love for information regarding the construction of Bailey's Upper to be brought forward in terms of scope, in terms of time, in terms of cost, and how that compares with your traditional school building. So that's one. Additionally, I understand from folks that were around that when Glasgow Middle School was built, it mirrored one of the options that's in the documents because they built the school on the grounds and pretty much just across the way, and then they demolished the old building, and that became fields. So they were on premise when that occurred. So we already have a precedent of that in Fairfax County. And again, I'm asking you to bring the information, the cost, the FAR, all of the things that accompany that kind of project. If you could bring that to the conversation, because I think it will be quite informative because we've already had that occur. The third thing that I wanted to raise, working in Loudoun County for many years, and Loudoun County has built many, many schools in the past 15, 20 years. The year that this school was opened, which I had the opportunity to open, 3 schools were open in 1 year. It was the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school, and they're building them fast and furious. And one of the things that also, I think, saves some of the costs, and again, this is for you to explore and get some more information rather than my anecdotal recollection, particularly with the elementary schools, they were not all designed differently. It was the same design, they just changed the color scheme. So right away, you're saving a lot of money. Granted, when you're starting from scratch, it's a different conversation than when you're trying to offset, how can we add to this building, which has a lot of drawbacks. You have floors that are taller on one side, and you have the weird, step down inside of the building, not being able to elevate, ceilings of the cafeteria the way that we have it at Falls Church High School. It prevents some of that when you can begin anew, which is kind of my support for doing it on site if at all possible. I know some of the schools it is, because it allows you to perhaps use the same plan over and over again, and you could save all of those design costs. So I wanted to share that. Again, and the last thing that I wanted to share that I didn't hear in the conversation of planning for what to look at. FCPS also owns properties right now that we haven't really had, and we haven't had an in-depth conversation in terms of what their future can look like. Some of those properties are being used for administrative purposes, and some not as much. Graham Center, Graham Road, the former Graham Road Elementary School comes to mind. We've toured that building ad nauseum. It's really underutilized. What can we do there? And there are others like it that we haven't really elevated to a full board conversation. So I think having that kind of data would be very helpful, because we have to have a really strong sense of all of the assets and what we can maximize with maybe a minor renovation, or just tear down and start anew in order to realize where we are. It needs to be comprehensive, but it still needs to be chunked. But those are the pieces that I really want to move to the forefront of this discussion.
Mr. McDaniel?
Well, Dr. Anderson said the magic word, and Janice might know what I'm talking about, which is tear down. We do have a site sitting out in southwestern Fairfax County that, when it was closed back in June of 2010, the board promised to look at options for, and no board has looked at options for. And it's something that I know myself and Ms. Anderson are pushing. It's Clifton Elementary. We have security risks there going on, and we're exploring options of what to do with that. So if that could be packaged as part of this broader conversation of what to do with these buildings and sites that have just kind of been allowed to go, so to speak, I'd be very supportive of that.
I forgot to say 2 things. One is, Ms. Dixit brought up, we might want to refer certain issues to FPAC, and I think that's an excellent idea. And so we might want to discuss what issues we refer to FPAC for consideration. And second, I just wanted to bring up what was mentioned by Dr. Anderson, that we can't do what PG County did. What they did was build 6 schools in 2 years. And PG County officials I've spoken with and have come to FPAC said that would have taken them 12 years. And what this report that's on board docs shows is that for the same money, we could build schools in half the time, 3 years instead of 6 years. And what they say, we can build, second option, of 6 elementary schools and 1 middle school. They could renovate 3 and build 3 brand new elementary schools and 1 brand new middle school, and still have it cost less in half the time, which is extraordinary to consider as a possibility for our county. Even though we have an excellent facilities team, that's not our current pace of operations. And so accelerating the pace of construction, so it's not 42 years, but coming down to closer to 2025 as required by school board policy would be excellent. So I would like to, at least initially, I'd like to be able to have CPDC make a request to the chair for 2 work sessions, and so I'll propose a motion and open to discussion. I'd like to move that CPDC request that the school board chair and vice chair schedule a board work session on design, build, and construction management at risk, combined with opportunities for commercial office space conversions, and a second work session on, actually, can you bring up a document so we can type this up? Just so we can all be looking at it. Okay, so I would like to move request that the school board chair and vice chair schedule a board work session on design, build, and construction management at risk. Methodologies, along with opportunities for commercial office space conversion, comma, and a second board work session on public-private partnerships. Do I have a second? Ms. Dixit? Discussion, Ms. Dixit?
I just wanted to see if we could add the, what Dr. Anderson and Mr. McDaniel were talking about, the existing facility.
Oh,
for
sure.
FCPS, and I don't know
Sure.
how you want to add that in our discussion.
Perhaps that's, should that be part of the first one
Be
with
enlarged a
commercial?
little bit.
Should that be part of the commercial office space
Yes,
conversion?
yes, there.
Okay, so can, before the comma, and utilization of existing FCPS assets. Maybe for utilization, but optimizing. Discussion, Ms. Dixit?
I think we can just remove utilization, right, if you're using optimizing?
Well, some of them are being used as administrative centers. Maybe Clifton Elementary is not being used at all, but some of them are being used. But I think we're talking about, could they be repurposed to something where we're getting better use out of it from a systemic perspective? But I'm open to deleting it if you prefer. I mean, because optimizing alone, if you're saying optimizing assets, it sounds like you're improving the assets. But really what we're talking about is efficient utilization.
Kevin? Okay, yeah, you can do that. Optimizing / utilization.
Okay. And then, okay, yeah, okay. Mr. McDaniel, do you have any comments on the motion?
No, I'm fine with that. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Dr. Anderson, do you have any comments?
Just want to be sure that we're not leaving any of the components that I thought I heard earlier out.
We're leaving swing spaces out. And so what I would propose with swing spaces is either we could refer it to FPAC for study, or we could make a separate motion. I'll ask Ms. Mansky. We could also make a separate motion asking facilities to come back, to consult with the county, maybe to study what happened at Glasgow and then to come back with some research, but Ms. Mansky, go ahead.
Would you allow me to make a suggestion on this? Because we've been thinking a lot about this internally. I don't want to just, we can maybe kill two birds with one stone in this instance, where we have 2 projects that are coming online with design in fiscal year 25 per our current cash flow. That's Cub Run Elementary School in Franklin. Our team did some preliminary studies, and we feel that the Cub Run site has the potential to do one of those on-site swings. So right now, we're developing that scope of work to do an RFP to hire an architect so they can get started in design next year. And so the thought that staff had was we could write in the scope of work where an architect typically at the end of their conceptual design might present 3 options, and then we pick the one advantageous. We might send it out to the design review committee or have a community meeting. We could ask them to make sure one of the options shows us what it would look like to do an on-site swing, and another option shows us what it looks like to do the traditional phase occupied renovation, so then we can see it in real time, because I do think swing space is very nuanced, it's very site-specific, like that, it might be a great solution, it might not be the right solution for Cub Run, but for another school, but you don't know until you really get to that analysis, and we're already going to be doing it as part of the Cub Run renovation. So that's just something we'd like to potentially float out there, and once we get those conceptual designs, the architect, as part of their due course and practice, will highlight any like zoning risks, and they're already going to be engaging with the county as part of the permitting process. We just feel like, why not take the process we already have and use this as a good opportunity?
But don't we already have some existing information if that's what occurred at Glasgow Middle?
That's really encouraging, like if it's been done before, all the more reason in this Cub Run RFP to ask them specifically to look at it, because we think it can be a possibility here.
I think we do need to embed the swing space conversation somewhere, because it is such a huge component to potential savings, even though there's some other costs because of the expedited timetable. I would not want for that to be lost, which is why I wanted to raise that. I thought there were some pieces that we were still missing. And do you see, Janice, that there's one of these 2? And again, this is just a recommendation, but do you see that one of these 2 work sessions makes more sense to embed the swing space conversation? Should that be with the P3? Because I'm not really seeing the need at this point to refer the swing space discussion back to FPAC, because there's quite a bit of data here regarding that, and we just need to unpack it.
Why don't we do it with the second work session, because the first one is very full, and to give justice to that, and because swing space is addressed as part of the P3 report, maybe it makes more sense there. But I appreciate what Ms. Szymanski is saying, but perhaps we could also do some historical research at what happened at Glasgow and see if there are any other examples in FCPS history, and that could be brought to the work session to talk about that background.
Sure. I think maybe we can just continue the conversation to make sure we come prepared on top of the analysis that we've done as part of this.
Okay. Would, if we amended the language to say on public-private partnerships and swing spaces?
That works.
Okay. So can I amend my motion?
Ken, because it hasn't been, was it seconded?
It was seconded. You seconded it. No, Ms. Dixon seconded
I
it.
think we both.
All right. Yes. So can I make all in? Can you? Yeah, and swing spaces. All right. All in favor of the motion? Aye. And Mr. McDaniel. So it's unanimous. Okay. So that will be conveyed. In terms of FPAC, I feel we should provide some direction to FPAC on what we would like them to study and work on, because Ms. Herman, can you convey what memos you currently have on your agenda to prepare?
Yes, let me see if I can pull that up really quick. We definitely have one related to procurement. Let's see here, sorry. This. Oh, man. Oh, no, sorry.
Maybe while you're looking for that, can I move on to an agenda item 1.08 and just ask for a quick update on the facilities condition assessment update?
No change since the work session on Tuesday where we provided the overall timeline. Staff at facilities and Office of Procurement Services are continuing to develop the scope and the RFP for a solicitation.
Do you have a sense of when that will go out the door?
I do not. That's in procurement's hands. I'd like them to be able to provide an update.
Is that Ms. Burden who does that?
That's correct.
Okay. All right, Ms. Herman.
I found the topics. Sorry for the delay. One item is considerations for procurement policies. So it was our thought process was that is, seeing what staff and the school board had thought based on all the work that's been done over the past 6-9 months, and to do some follow-up research on P3's CMAR, based on, again, the changes and also where things are headed with the policy 8240. So that is a piece, and if that memo and the research and feedback needs to be more focused on these things now that we're all seeing this report, that's fine. We also, have 2 other topics, but we did kind of identify the procurement next steps based on feedback and discussion as something we could look at.
Perhaps we could refer the P3 report and the staff response to FPAC for FPAC to prepare its own response to the 2 documents. Would that be something that, so can I make a motion to, I move that CPDC refer the P3 report and the staff response to FPAC for FPAC to prepare an analysis and recommendation or response to the school board. Second. Any discussion? Mr. McDaniel?
Could,
I actually had a question, so I'm fine with the motion, but I do, after we vote, can we go back to the facility condition assessment?
Yes, of course.
Thanks, so I'm aye, that's fine.
I just wanted to know if this FPAC recommendation could be in sync with our work session? Mm-hmm. Okay.
That's an excellent idea. And, okay, so do you mind? Response to the school board, and if you could just add on at the end, to be delivered in advance of the relevant work sessions. Thank you. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Okay, it's unanimous. Second one is Dr. Anderson. Okay, Mr. McDaniel, you had a question about the facilities condition assessment?
Yeah, so it's kind of more of a comment. I am going to request that the chair and vice chair, because of the sensitivity of the responses to the RFI that we put out, I am going to request that the chair and the vice chair schedule a closed session conversation so the full board can ask questions about this. And there's really kind of two reasons for that. One, because of the sensitive nature of it. They're obviously confidential responses, but number two, we've never done this process before, and it is to inform a new renovation queue hypothetically. I do think we need to give the full board the opportunity to kind of see what industry said in those responses and let the board ask questions about that. So the board has a full understanding of what is contained in those responses. I've read them. Individually. There's a lot of good information in there, and the only vehicle that we have to bring that before the full board is a closed session conversation. So I am going to ask the chair and the vice chair to schedule that. That was my only comment.
Would you like to make a motion in that regard?
Sure, I would move that CPDC request the board chair and vice chair schedule a closed session conversation to discuss the responses to the RFI for the FCA. And if I can squeeze any more acronyms in there, I will try to. Well, technically, the CPDC requests the chair and vice chair schedule a closed session discussion, agenda item, whatever, on the RFI responses to the FCA RFI. On the responses to the FCA RFI. That's probably the best way of phrasing it.
RFI. Okay, all in favor? Okay. All right, second, Ms. Dixit? All right. Yeah, sorry. It's such a good motion. Okay, all in favor? It's unanimous. I would also like to make a similar motion that CPDC request the superintendent to share the responses to the FCA RFI with FPAC, consistent with any legal restrictions and redactions, comma, so FPAC may provide expert input on the development of the new renovation queue. Just as background, I understand, I think Ms. Dixit and I both have a lot of experience with federal procurement, and my experience with RFI responses is that they are virtually never attorney-client privilege, certainly not that, and usually not confidential either. They're more typically published because, sometimes anonymized, sometimes not. But the whole idea is that all potential bidders benefit from seeing the, and the organization that's doing the procurement benefit from seeing the information that is shared by all respondents. And it just makes better bids, it makes better bid selection. And so I think there just needs to be a formal request to enable a legal analysis if one is required, because we have this group of experts and they've been requesting it for a while, and it seems to have stalled maybe in legal, but I think making it a little bit more formal just will allow us to have an answer. Can it be shared? And maybe it's not in the raw, but maybe it can be redacted to some extent to remove any procurement-sensitive items. But again, if it's procurement-sensitive, it probably wasn't submitted in response to an RFI, because I don't think there was, I reviewed the RFI, and I do not recall any provisions guaranteeing confidentiality of information submitted. Do I have a second because that's necessary before a motion can be discussed?
I have a question, because you kind of went off the rails there a little bit and talked about it before it was seconded. Could this not be a result of the first motion where we're going to have the discussion and close? I feel a little bit in the dark in terms of being able to make a determination here, because if we're going to talk about it and close because there's some questions that can't be asked, or is it because we can't disclose some of the information contained therein, then that would be counter to that approach. Because
So-
once we disclose it to FPAC, we've disclosed it.
Right, and that's why I say consistent with any legal restrictions and redactions, right? I mean, you can, if I have an attorney-client privilege document, right, there is certain information that you can redact that then makes it public. Similar to a classified document, if you make certain redactions, right, then it can be publicly disclosed. So redactions are just a common feature of, the public disclosure process, and that would allow it to be, and again, I just want to cast doubt that any redactions are necessary at all, but I'm not the judge, but that would allow that process. A request would require Office of Division Counsel to kind of say which parts of this, if any, right, because I'm not making assumptions that any of it can be shared, but I believe at least part of it could be shared with FPAC so they can advise the board.
Sure, and I'm all about that, but I just feel like this motion is predicated on the first motion. If we don't have that meeting, then we can't accomplish
Okay,
the second
well-
one. I feel as if that's
So
a
we can-
motion we should be embedded in that, at that meeting. I mean, it could still be, I don't know if it could still be a CPDC request. It just seems to, it doesn't seem to stand alone to me, but
Ms.
I
Dixon?
don't know.
So I kind of want to first look at the RFI response ourselves as a board, and then decide, and knowing how the RFI response is, if there's any proprietary information, there's any pricing involved, then I would be hesitant to share that publicly. And maybe we can summarize the part of it and then share that with FPAC without telling who responded what. That's the way government issues the responses to the industry. They don't say, this company responded this way and that way. So I would say, let's just do that, and then we can decide whether we
Sure.
can do this motion.
I appreciate it. I withdraw the motion. With that, I propose that we postpone the rest of the agenda. We've basically already covered most of the rest of the agenda, but Herndon ES renovation and different renovation queues, we can discuss at the next school board meeting, because I want to be respectful of everyone's time.
Before
Yes,
we
Ms.
adjourn,
Semansky,
can
yes.
we go back up through some of these motions, just so I'm clear on staff expectations? So if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course.
So I'm reading this, the first work session that staff were to present would be on design, build, construction, management risk methodologies, along with opportunities for commercial real estate office space conversion and optimizing utilization of existing assets. Okay, so for the first component, it's my understanding, staff have provided a follow-on motion back in February that discusses this at length, so we would come with that report that we have already done. I do want to point out for the second piece, I don't believe there has been a specific directive to do a commercial office space conversion report, or very specifically an optimization and utilization of existing FCPS assets. That is a little bit different from the follow-on motion from May that we were directed to do on lease consolidation. So that would be, in my opinion, like a new directive. The first piece I feel like we've already addressed, and it would become more just a sharing, and we can present that. I do have concerns with the second piece, because that has not been part of the follow-on motions to date.
So I guess to my colleagues, perhaps we could put together a motion for a school board meeting to have a study done of commercial office space conversion and optimizing utilization of existing FCPS assets. I welcome your feedback. Ms. Dixit?
My understanding was that as a board, we can discuss too. Do we need a presentation from Janice at this point for this particular discussion? Because I think a lot of us have, like, Dr. Anderson was sharing her information. I did not know until today. You did not know some of the information she was sharing, and same with Mr. McDaniel. I think even the board can discuss this, even if we don't direct the staff.
Yeah, that's a good point. Dr. Anderson?
Yes, I do agree with that, and I think it will be important when it comes to existing FCPS assets. What I would envision is, what do we have? What exists?
Yeah.
Because the Clifton
Inventory.
site, this site, and some of the other information, I don't think it's as, challenging. It's like, oh, Glasgow did this, and this is what happened. These should be existing things that we could just share to spur the conversation. And I also think I asked a question regarding the Bailey's construction, which would tie into the office space conversion. It's just having some things for us to spur the discussion with the board to determine, what's possible from what has already occurred. I don't think it's a whole new body of work for you at this time.
I just wanted to manage expectations, especially since many of these work sessions are a part of a big, robust document we did. I just wanted to point out those particular items were not part of follow-ons, and again, I just want to manage the expectations for the work session and your discussion.
Yeah.
And perhaps in building out the agenda, we can continue to work. I don't think the work session will happen next month, so perhaps at the next CPDC meeting, we can have further discussion and drill down a little bit, looking at going through the CIP, because the back of it has a lot of useful information. We can kind of talk through some of those assets. By the way, I thought Clifton was on, the term's escaping me, it's not on public sewer, right? I thought, isn't that right, Mr. McDaniel? It's
All
not
of
on public
Clifton.
sewer, it's on a,
Clifton is mostly well.
I think only Gunston and Clifton were on, what's that word where you don't have public sewer?
Well and, well and what do you call it?
Yeah.
Septic, well and septic.
The septic, yeah, septic system, so it's on a septic system. I believe that's the limitation of that site. Okay, so are there other aspects of the other motions that you'd like to discuss, Ms. Szymanski?
No, and again, we can continue the conversation. I just wanted to make sure we were meeting the board's expectations. It's my understanding we've already provided 2 follow-on motions that discuss the public-private partnerships. Both motions also address swing space, and we wanted preliminarily, and then the other one specific to the scope of work of the P3. So it's our understanding we'd be presenting that for a discussion.
That's fine.
Great.
All right, any further issues that anyone would like to raise?
Yes, we're overdue.
Oh, okay. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very exciting stuff. I was reading it, I was just so giddy. Oh my God, I was so giddy. And it's like, oh, it's just